And welcome everybody to the Razor's Edge. Of course, I'm Bill the Razor Rayback. In this show, we cut away all the Washington BS. We slice through the liberal lies. We pierce the progressivism promises, and you're about to experience the awesome power of the Razor's Edge. I'm joined here by Lance of East Clinton, one of the students.
Thanks for having me on.
And Lance is going to do the news with us today. And Lance, let's jump right into that and see what's going on.
All right. As reported by Ashita Nagesh of the Metro UK, Californians have called for their state to secede from the U.S. after Donald Trump's victory in last Tuesday's presidential election. A very defined electoral map shows a sharp philosophical divide between the West Coast states and the heartland of the U.S. The idea of California, Oregon, and Washington breaking off to form their own country called COW has been a popular point of discussion since the election. With several dozen malcontent Hollywood celebrities threatening to move to Canada, another popular rumor has been circulated about the left coast states becoming a province of our neighbors to the north.
I say go.
I mean,
I would say that, but
I think it'd be interesting to see. Let's see how their way of life works versus ours.
Canada said they take Bieber back, but they won't take any other celebs.
Yeah, they don't want to. Well, you know what? Here's the thing: California, Oregon, and Washington, which I like to call cow, send the cow over to them because you know what? They are $7 trillion as a state in debt, which is 1/3 of our debt. And so, if they take their debt with them, go to Canada and see how that's going to work out. See if Canada, in their socialist system, can dig you out of your debt.
Yeah.
And it's always the grass is always greener on the other side until you get there and you find out what it's all about.
Yeah. In their way of life, it's just so much different. They see things in a completely different way than what the rest of America sees, and it's just really.
And we have a great relationship with Canada, and this isn't a bash on them, but the people that are in Canada, and I know quite a few of them, and if you talk to them about the healthcare system, which we've kind of modeled Obamacare after, it's a disaster up there. People don't like it, and so if that's what they want. And the Hollywood stars, I know Sean Hannity played something on his show the other day. It was great. It was it was a mock commercial about Trump Air, and that everybody on the left get on the left side of the plane, and you'll find parachutes underneath your seat, and you can all exit through the back of the plane. And I wished them a happy landing as they passed over Canada. But I guess the Canadian, from what I was reading, the immigration offices in Canada were flooded right after Trump's election, and their servers broke down. It's an immigration thing, isn't it? Isn't that interesting? Maybe Canada's going to build a wall.
Yeah. Well, these are the same people telling us that Donald Trump's racist for saying Mexicans are pouring across the border. But what's wrong with Mexico? If you're gonna move because Trump's elected, what's wrong with Mexico?
That's a great point. Yeah, go to if it goes both ways, you can go over there if you don't like it here.
Yeah, it's just kind of hypocritical.
Very much so. What else you have there, Lance?
In another effort to exert government control over individuals' power of free choice, the Associated Press reports that the debate over whether sugary beverages should be heavily taxed is scheduled to be taken up by the Cook County Board of Commissioners in Chicago. Similar punitive taxes on soda have already been enacted in New York, San Francisco, and Oakland, California, and also Boulder, Colorado.
And what do you think about that? I mean, you think government should be able to legislate what you eat?
No, not at all. I tell you, since Michelle Obama's put in that new food, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, her little green and red.
Especially student athletes. I don't feel like I get near the enough calories that I should eat because I'm burning it all off. In practices and stuff, and it's like nothing.
Right.
That's like a snack for me.
Right.
If that.
And I understand what they're saying about the sugar, but at some point, I think that falls upon the family to make those decisions.
Yeah, you live your life the way you want to live. If you want to eat 20 donuts, go right ahead. But the government shouldn't have no say in what you eat.
Exactly, and that's where we have a problem. Is the Constitution continually gets bent, where our freedoms that are provided by the Constitution are constantly being manipulated. And this is an example. Of course, in New York City, you can't buy any bigger than a 16-ounce soda, and so they, in their warped way of thinking, they think this is going to stop them. So, what prevents somebody from buying two 16-ounce sodas?
Yeah, exactly. And, if people learn to eat in regulation, nothing's really about it with that. It's just how you regulate yourself.
Yeah.
And, the government should have no say in that. If you want to if you want to drink, 5 Pepsis, go right ahead, but that's your choice.
We really don't regulate alcohol consumption. We allow it, and we do have laws about drinking and driving, but we don't tell them that they can only go in and have one drink at a bar. Yeah. That's actually more destructive than what we see going on with the sodas. But anyhow, again, those countries within our own borders, they can leave if they like. So
yeah, exactly.
So, and what else you have there, Lance?
The AFP reports a massive cyber attack has hit at least 5 of Russia's largest banks. Moscow-based internet security giant Kaspersky said Thursday. Kaspersky said in a statement that the distribution of denial attacks began Tuesday and targeted the websites of at least 5 well-known financial institutions in the top 10 in Russia. Such attacks have also grown more frequent in recent years with the development of online banking, but also in the context of heightened tensions over the crisis in Ukraine, with attackers targeting the sites of the Kremlin and NATO. Most recently, Washington accused Russia of using cyber attacks against the Democratic Party to attempt to disrupt this week's presidential election.
That's all I could do is laugh about that one. I don't know. I just don't. I do believe that there's cyber attacks. Now, the motivation, I would not think would be one where they were going after the DNC.
I don't see that.
I think that's one of the excuses that they're trying to
cover up.
Yeah, to fall back on, and it tried to blame Hillary's failure on that. But anyhow, interesting, and I think that's going to be a problem that President-elect Trump's going to have. I think that's going to be a different kind of warfare that we haven't seen, where they're going to attack our computers, and how are we going to build a system to protect ourselves from that?
Yeah, I feel like the DNC, it's just so corrupt, and you can go on and on about how corrupt it is and stuff, but this is just them blaming Russia for doing that's just a cover-up of how corrupt they are. They don't want people to know, so every time something happens with them, another big story will hit the news to cover that up, and it's a continuing cycle of it. And,
right.
And it's obvious, too. It's not like you can't see it.
Right, and Rick and I were talking before the show how the DNC may be appointing as the into their new leadership, the head of one of the Muslim groups in Minnesota might be taking over the DNC.
Wow.
That'll solve our problems, right? So anyhow, or solve their problems. I don't care what they do. They could blow up the party over there for all I care. But, is that going to appeal to Americans?
I can't see how it would. And this isn't trying to be, racist or anything, but you want if you're trying to lead a country, you're going to want people that are similar to you. Muslims. Right. There's nothing against Muslims, but they don't have the same values and cultures that regular Americans do.
Well, they follow Sharia law, which is a different set of rules.
It's too harsh.
Right.
They talk about Donald Trump saying all these bad things about women. Well, Bill Clinton's done bad things to women, and
great point.
And Muslims, Sharia law. These are women have no rights in that. So it's like really hypocritical. And
in the Islamic community, you're absolutely correct. So I just don't. It's counterintuitive for Democrats, who are supposed to be for the people, to support such a domineering religion such as Islam. I'm not saying that the people that follow that, they have this is a free country and they have the right to follow that, but they do not have the right to impose those values on Americans.
Not at all.
And so, that's we'll see how that develops as it goes along. And Lance, go ahead, and this is our last story here, which was kind of interesting because we'll comment on it in a second.
Twitter is exploding with people calling for President-elect Donald Trump to be assassinated. The Republican real estate billionaire beat Hillary Clinton handily to become the next president of the U.S., but that hasn't stopped lots of people calling for somebody to murder him.
well, go ahead and read that first one, and then we just alternate on these.
Yeah, here's a couple tweets. My mom is talking about assassinate Donald Trump. Watch out, guy. My white suburban mother is coming for you. A nice grammar.
And then the next one says, if Trump gets assassinated, you're all going to have Mike Pence, and he's probably worse. So you need to assassinate both of them. Nice job there.
Can somebody please assassinate Donald Trump before January?
And then we have, so which one of you greasy-headed, depressed white going to take one for the team and assassinate Trump? Well, yeah, I'm going to comment on this whole thing in a second here. And then last one says, when you all going to assassinate Trump? I guess reading the rest of it says that the Secret Service has a history of investigating threats against your president.
Yeah.
And as Chad just chimed in, if it had been Barack Obama, we would have had full investigation. Those people would have been arrested.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And so we're seeing already a hypocrisy where if they don't agree with the person that's in power, you're not going to get that same, until Trump changes the cabinet, and then that's going to change.
Yep, the leftist media controls half of the population's opinion, so.
Yes, sure enough. Well, Lance, thanks for coming on.
I appreciate it.
TalkTV.us. We hope to have you on. At least I know you're going to be busy here through basketball, but let's try to get you on when we can, and we'll expand your role.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
And that's Lance from East Clinton, and taking some time out of his evening after being in Cincinnati today to watch some basketball.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Lance.
Thanks.
Okay. And then our next guest is Chad Taylor. We'll have Chad coming in here. I will say this, and this is a post-election show. If people have been watching,
Let me know if you want to.
What's going to go on with this in the post-election is we're going to talk about some things. We're going to talk about with Chad here how businesses are going to be affected by President-elect Trump, and how you see as a businessman how that's going to affect the country. I just want to say that this whole election cycle, and I'm kind of glad it's over with, because I think the whole country for the last 15 months is suffering from a burnout from this whole thing. But I will say this. When Donald Trump won, and Rick and I did the election show on WALH, and we were talking, and we did a projection. Actually, Rick, we were all spot on our number. There was a map, and this was a pretty neat site. I think the New York Times had it, and you could color the states. Well, we were getting the results, and we started projecting states, and when we left the air at midnight, we had projected 289 for Trump, and sure enough, that's what he ended up getting. So I just say this. I now know what Elliot Ness felt like when Al Capone got convicted of tax evasion. The relief that happened in that man's life to see his work to finally come fruition. And do it, Mike.
Check one.
Okay, he's good. So that's my take on it. Again.
When you talk about Elliot Ness, it's. I think I was talking to a gentleman yesterday in my dealership about how, I think what we really experienced there was the true DNA of Americans came out.
Yeah, absolutely, and we're getting condemned. The media is battering as they call it, and I think the LA Times referred to it as the West Coast versus the heartland of America, and they kind of ignorantly left out the Northeast, because the Northeast is the other pocket of blue. But they tried to insult us during the election. Anybody that was going to be, and I don't pocket this just into Trump supporters, because I initially was a Ted Cruz supporter. But if you were a Donald Trump supporter, you went over to support Donald Trump, they called you deplorable. And that backfired on them. We did what the Democrats called the big switch. We took this thing that was supposed to be this bad tag on all the American voters, and we switched it. We made fun out of it, and it worked to our advantage. So,
they don't realize that they created that.
Yes, they did. Yeah, you're right. They don't understand that.
I speak to some of I've got a lot of friends that are on the liberal side of the fence, and I joke with them, but I'm being dead serious when I say, but you created this monster.
Yeah. Absolutely, and that's what
8 years of this created this monster.
right. And you watch the news, and we're going to talk with some of our other guests later, but about some of these things. But some of the topics that they're most worried about, like Obamacare and that, they just don't understand that was one of the referendums that why Hillary Clinton did not win. I mean, I could go into years and years of things with her, but one of the primary things is, and for me getting involved back in 2008, was to derail Obamacare because of the horrible things that law is going to do. And yet they're saying today, well, maybe it's salvageable. Maybe, well, no, that's not what the American people say.
Correct. That's right.
So,
And I think that's a lot of the reason of why the business world, or at least the business world that I interact with on a day-to-day basis. You
Right.
know, I'm in a very conservative industry.
Right.
I'm in an industry that deals 100% with discretionary income. So, you know,
why don't you talk about, well, while we got it, on the topic, what is your business and what do you do?
Sure. I own and operate Taylor's South Shore Marina, which is a full-line certified boat dealership on Cowan Lake.
Okay.
32 years in business, second generation.
And so you have a vested interest in what happens in the country as far as business laws, and especially being a small businessman being saddled with the healthcare law.
Yeah, healthcare is one of our major issues right now,
Right.
Especially for growth, because it's not just saying, do we produce enough available income to add a job, but then we have to look at the healthcare cost that goes on top of that.
Right.
Repealing Obamacare was huge for me,
Right.
because, for instance, just in my little company, it cost me over $35,000 a year this year.
Sure.
Because prior to Obamacare, if you're a small business with 4, 5, 6 employees, especially family businesses. I mean, what we did was we went out into the health insurance world. We bought a decent health care plan, or a premium, if you will, for our staff,
Right.
and we
Right.
covered 100% of the cost.
Right.
If some did, we did,
Right.
because we were a growing company and we're trying to get solid staff members with us.
Right.
And
You want to get good employees and you want
good
to keep
benefits,
them. Right.
absolutely. And what happened was when Obamacare came into law, if you weren't part of a group, which in them days, the groups were Walmart, and or
Right.
you weren't in the public sector, you weren't part of a group.
Right, you weren't the selected,
Sure.
selected, protected, I guess would be
Well,
the right
what
term.
happened was it literally became illegal for me as a business owner. If you're my employee and I want to pay for your health insurance,
Right.
it is illegal for me to do that. I would have had to add it to your salary, withhold it for you, and tax you on it.
Sure.
Because since we're not in a group, now when you look at group health insurance, there's the Affordable Care Act fee. They're paying that fee. Well, basically the government was saying, hey, you're basically paying for your employees. You're not over here feeding this funnel that we need in your money. So it is
Right.
illegal. And the penalties would literally shut us down.
Sure.
So we had to enact a group health insurance policy.
Right.
And it's over $35,000 a year on just the portion that I'm paying for my staff.
Right, and it goes both ways. We had an attorney on last week, and he was talking. He has some close relations that are doctors, and the record-keeping software that they had to purchase was driving them out of business. I mean, they were
absolutely.
leaving the
Yeah,
country
sure.
because they didn't want to have to buy this, and then every year you have to buy the patch for it, which is like $5,000
Right,
more.
right.
And so the individual general practitioner out in Wilmington, Ohio, can't stay in business anymore because they're eating up anything they make on this atrocity.
Well, and they have to basically treat them like cattle. I mean, they're going to have to herd in. I've got family that is that's in the health, or excuse me, medical industry down in another state. But he says I have to herd them through like cattle. I have to see 150 patients a day just to make up the money that I'm spending.
To pay for the
it'd be
government
no different
regulations.
with me selling boats. I'm going to have to sell 30 more boats a year,
Right.
just to pay for all the new regulatory fees that I have,
Right.
just to be legal.
Right.
How can we get good health care from a doctor when they got to herd us through like cattle?
Absolutely.
And they've got overhead, they've got bills. That's their business.
Well, and that's the thing. They just don't. And people can say that, and I'll debate this till the day I die, that they had the American taxpayers' best interest at heart when this bill went through. That had nothing to do with it.
No.
It was all about controlling 1/6 of the economy, which they want their fingers in, and they want control of it.
Sure, absolutely.
What do you see happening here as far as when we go down the street here with Obamacare, or well, let's say Obamacare is gone. What do you see Donald Trump doing that you believe is going to open up the American economy, is going to make it more prosperous for a small businessman like you?
I think first and foremost is repealing Obamacare. I mean, that's going to just sink right into the heart of small business owners. The trade that he's going to do, and when he talks about, increasing the GDP up to 4%, I mean,
Right.
we're only at about a 2% increase.
Yeah, we've been under that for most of
Under that
Obama's.
for most of the last 8 years.
Right.
And I was actually just doing some little research today on the internet, and we would average, a 4% growth from World War II to 2000. I mean,
It's
two,
crazy.
you can't make a difference on 2%. You can't go out and create jobs on
No,
2% growth. Now, you get to a 3 to 4% growth, you can create jobs. I think for business owners like myself, I think that's one of the big reasons why we were so pro-Trump versus pro-Hillary, because he's a seasoned CEO.
Right.
And he's not a polished politician.
Right.
And I can't believe his campaign, well, obviously it doesn't matter now, but I can't believe his campaign manager wasn't out there on the street corner saying this is not a polished politician.
Yeah. Well, and I think we saw Trump grow during the election cycle. I think we saw Hillary, the mean-spirited conservative, which Donald Trump was portrayed as, is he was actually going out. And I saw him over at the airport here in Wilmington when he flew through and stopped to talk to the people here. He was talking about policy. He was talking about things he wanted to do.
Yeah.
Hillary was on the attack.
It was constant attack, and there was no factual data and anything that she was saying. You go back to Donald Trump's, when you look at his tax reform plan, the largest tax breaks come to the middle class and the working people. I mean,
Right.
you're talking up to 35% reduction
Right.
in a tax bill to an average family with a couple kids out there making 50, 60 grand a year.
Sure.
That's middle of America, Bill.
It is. It is. And what they don't understand, they keep on talking about the 1%. But even though they talk about that 1%, any politician, they come up with this number and they say, well, $250,000 is, well, you know what? That is not the upper 1%. I'm sorry. The upper 1%,
That's correct.
they are in 7, 8, 9 figures. We're not talking about somebody making $250,000, because whatever they might be doing with their business, they may not be making actually $250,000.
Yeah, when you look at it, people say the little acronym that the top 10% pay 90% of the taxes. They're
Right.
not too far off from that.
Right.
I mean, we're not a $250,000 average year, or not average, but household income worker. That's not the top of the limit
No.
for what we deal with in this country.
Right. And, I pulled up this article. In October, the federal government collected $221 trillion, that's with a T, $692 billion, which is $1,500 per worker, basically. And the federal government, for the month, still ran a deficit of $44 trillion.
Staggering.
And we're never going to stop this if we keep on spending like that.
Well, and that's the reckless spending that's been going on for 8 years. And then when you sat and you listened to when Hillary would talk, and as a small business owner, I've always said I never rule out Republican versus Democrat, because
Right.
I was raised, when I was a young kid growing up, the Democrats were the backbone of the small working man.
Well, and the South and John Kennedy, I mean, if you look at some of Kennedy's policies, Kennedy would be probably a middle-of-the-road Republican if he was running.
I believe
today.
that 100%. Yeah, and there was no substance in Hillary's voice when there was basically no end in sight, and there was, hey, we've acquired $21 trillion in debt, and you want to acquire that much more in the next 4 to 5 years with no plan to pay it back. You
Yep.
can't continue. I can't run my business like that. I can't run my household like that. You can't run your household like that.
I agree, and that's the crazy thing is they think, well, there's these economists out here who think you can do that as a country and it's going to work out, but we couldn't do that. I mean,
No.
You couldn't do it at home, I couldn't do it at home, so I don't understand. But we're going to continue our conversation in a second. We're going to bring Tim Fillinger on from Cleveland. He's our Cleveland contributor, and we'll get into some more of this about the business and some of the other things that we're going to see Donald Trump do maybe in the first 100 days.
Absolutely.
Where he may go with some of his... Hey, Tim, how you doing tonight?
Good, Mr. Deplorable. How are you?
Do you take offense to that, Bill?
Absolutely not. I didn't wear my deplorable shirt tonight, Tim. But we're joined here with Chad Taylor. Chad is the owner-operator of Southside Marina here in...
South Shore Marina.
South Shore, I'm sorry.
Yep.
South Shore Marina on Cowan Lake, which is in Clinton County. And he's joined us tonight. We were talking a little bit about the economy and Obamacare and how it's affecting him as a small businessman. Tim, what's your perspective? I mean, is there a lot of mourning going on in Cleveland right now? I mean, Cuyahoga County has traditionally went pretty heavily for the Democrats. What's the general feeling? Are they burning down buildings down there?
No, actually, surprisingly, they're not. The mood's kind of somber here, except for the small enclave of conservatives like myself.
Well, it was interesting. I mean, I think the turnout, if I'm not mistaken, in the big counties, which Obama carried, which would be your Franklin, Cuyahoga, and Hamilton, right. The turnout was down, especially on the Democrat side of things.
Yes, most definitely it was.
And I think that's why we saw a President Trump opposed to a President Clinton.
Hands down.
And I think that... Go ahead, Tim.
It's my understanding that she had about 6 million people or so that did not turn out for her this year. And I have to believe that a good percentage of those were probably Bernie Sanders voters.
Yeah, and of course, the narrative there is, well, if Sanders had won, he would have, or if Sanders had run, he would have won. And I'm sorry, I just don't see that.
I don't agree with that. I don't see how he could have. I mean, you look at the Electoral College and which way it went. I don't see where Sanders would have made up that much more ground.
No, it doesn't change the red and blue. And guys, I ask you this: Rick pulled up a map, and it showed the red areas and the blue areas according to districts and how they voted. And he also this publication, Rick, what was where did you see that at? Do you remember? It was on, somebody posted on Facebook. They overlaid the crime map in the United States where most of the crime was, and the blue areas coincided with the dark areas of crime. So does that surprise either of you that we saw that?
No, not at all. That's appropriate, considering their candidate is a criminal. So that makes sense. Well, you can tell I'm a gracious winner.
I'm glad you clarified for us there, Tim. Now, you know, this is great PR, and I wanted to talk about this in the top of the show. Barack Obama, during all this violence that he has really turned a blind eye to during 8 years that he's been in office, there was an officer, Paul Telluzzo, in New York who was murdered the weekend before the election. Donald Trump, who is not officially the president, called the family and offered his condolences and prayers to that family, and what a step forward for Donald Trump, because Barack Obama, you hear crickets in the office whenever we hear about one of our guys in blue getting killed.
Well, the man's presidential.
Yes.
I mean, there's just nothing else you can say about it. He's 20 times more presidential than Barack Obama. And why Barack Obama is not screaming from the rooftops right now to cease this violence and have a peaceful transition of power, which is why we're America.
Right.
It just absolutely I'm not surprised. I should be, but I'm not.
Well, I guess we've had enough of an example over the last several years not to be surprised by this because of his record, and I'm just so thankful that our underappreciated men in blue are going to finally get some backing. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that something that is, you know, when somebody gets killed unjustly by the police, then they deserve to be punished. But unfortunately, they took that fingerprint of several situations and they put that on all police across the country. And
well, they're allowed to stereotype and profile, whatever you want to call it, but the rest of us are not.
Right.
Right.
So,
you know, and sadly, this is the one area that BO has been consistent in its lack of attention to a situation like this.
Oh, absolutely. You know, that's they have not been able to. My you know, and this is this comes from the old Democratic playbook. But one of the things here that we've seen happen over the years is that the Democrats, who are supposed to be the peace-loving side of our society,
Right.
are always trying to rake the coals of racism. And I mean, I've submitted this on the show before. I submit that before Barack Obama came into office, we probably had the most peaceful relations between blacks and whites and Hispanics that we've ever had in the history of this
Yeah,
country.
Absolutely.
I would agree with that.
You know, you didn't hear people using racial slurs and that. You know, I had made the observation.
And if you did, they were coming from the left.
Right.
Some of the comments about Condoleezza Rice were deplorable. Pardon the phrase, but they
Yeah,
really
nice
were.
use of deplorable, though.
No
by the
pun
way.
intended.
Yeah,
Yeah, right?
Exactly. Different context.
Yeah, and you bring up a great comparison there with Condoleezza Rice, who I think she'd been a fine candidate, and yet if she's Republican and she's black, and if she's Republican and she's a woman, apparently that's different than being a Democrat and a black and Democrat and a woman.
I think Condoleezza Rice was honestly probably a step ahead of the rest of us. I agree. I think she would have been a great
Right.
candidate,
Right.
at least to throw into them primary runs.
Sure,
And
sure.
I think she might have sensed something that we probably know today, and I don't know if she would have pulled it off. I don't know if the black population would have came out.
Right, because they view her, and you know,
And it's a shame because she's a very intelligent person.
Yeah. Well, and the deplorable term there would be is that she's an Uncle Tom.
Oh, yeah.
That she is
Uncle Thomasina.
Yeah, Thomasina. Very good. She's part of the establishment, and that she's not really black. And I've just not quite figured out. Herman Cain went through that whole thing when he ran.
Right.
Is that he's not a real black? Well, yeah. And Ben Carson was the same thing happened there. So I find it interesting that I expect race relations will get better. I just think because it's not going to be a focus. Now, the media may still rake the coals, but it's not going to be a focus amongst politicians like it has been, and especially with Eric Holder, the criminal that was, you know, formerly the head of the Department of Justice. He was one of the most crooked guys we've ever seen that's
Right.
been in office. I mean, he was like the Frank Nitti to Al Capone, basically.
Yeah.
Well, and his successor hasn't been much better.
No, well, yeah, we could go down that street with Valerie Jarrett, and we'd see nothing but more.
I think you're going to continue to see the media dig the way they're digging until January 20th.
Right.
I think you're going to see it up to the holidays probably until something else takes the attention. But I think they're going to get their claws in.
Well, they are debating that. You know, they're still debating the results. They have some
sure.
They have some lawsuits in some states where they're trying to debate the outcome, and it really hasn't picked up much momentum. I don't see much about it in the lamestream media. So,
If we're going to debate outcomes, why isn't the Indians calling Chicago and debating the outcome of that?
Yeah, let's have a replay.
yeah. Hey, can we replay that 10th inning? That's right.
Yeah.
Actually, Cleveland did outscore Chicago to add them all up.
Yeah, that's very true.
Well, yeah,
Outscore them.
That's true. Cleveland scored more runs during the course of the series, so doesn't that make them the better team?
Yeah.
Maybe we need an electoral inning.
Hey, touche. That's good.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, we'll get the electoral vote going in the sports.
Hey, I was all for the Indians. The Reds can't put nothing together right now. so.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, but you know what? I got to tell you, Red fans out there, of which I've been one.
yep.
I became a Red fan 40 plus years ago in the advent of the Big Red Machine.
Sure.
And that's because, quite frankly, the Indians were so bad for so many years.
Yeah.
But the Reds have proven over the years, and even when they do have a couple of down seasons like they've had, they generally bounce back pretty quick.
Yeah. Well, you know, the Tribe, it was a great time for Cleveland, and win or lose on that whole thing.
Absolutely.
It was for the community. And you bring up a good point. I mean, as a kid, I was the same way growing up in Cleveland. It was the Reds that I was attracted to because obviously that was a great time for the Reds as they, most of the 1970s, they and the Dodgers were the dominant teams there, and it was kind of hard not to be attracted to the Reds with all the different kinds of talent that they had on that team.
Sure.
Oh, sure.
Guys, we look at, I believe just a little while ago, and this is already causing a stir, is Stephen K. Bannon has been, it looks like he's going to be appointed chief of staff for Donald Trump. And, of course, he is currently the CEO of Breitbart. And Breitbart, of course, is vying with Fox to take over as the preeminent conservative news outlet. And that's just stirring up all sorts of accusations of racism, and you can't have somebody that conservative. Well, you know, it's Donald Trump's administration, and quite honestly, Stephen K. Bannon. No, so it's New York.
That just got released tonight, I believe.
So New York Times says that Reince Priebus has been picked as chief of staff. What a
Yeah, that's what I had heard earlier.
I was seeing that as I was walking out the door to come here.
Ouch.
Stacy was mentioning it to me when I.
Yeah, so I stand corrected on that, and that's a blow because Reince Priebus, I have no use for that man whatsoever. Matter of fact, I have several times sent him emails, which I'm sure just got deleted, but I brought up the fact that I cannot, you know, they always ask for money to be donated directly to the RNC, and my response to him is I will never donate money to the RNC. If I support a candidate, I'm going to directly support that candidate. I'm not going to give the money to you guys so you can determine how that money is
you have
going to
no
be
control
dispensed.
over
Right.
it.
So I'm not, I'm not happy, and I hope that Trump doesn't get sucked into that. But well, let's start with the Supreme Court. Let's just take a look at that at first. Tim, what's your feelings? I mean, what do you think would be some good moves for for Trump and the Supreme Court? And I mean, I've seen some, and I don't know if that's going to change since this last came out. But what's your thinking on that?
Well, I've seen two names, one early on and one recently, and I'm in favor of both of them. Recently, I've seen Mike Lee's name mentioned.
Right.
Of course, that would be a blow to the Senate, but that would be a definite plus to the Supreme Court. Another name, too, is Ted Cruz.
Right.
And Cruz was my first choice, personally, for the presidency. But I did get on board the Trump train. The more I heard Donald speak, and he did have some very substantive policy discussions
Right.
and presentations, including the speech he made to Detroit a month or two ago.
Yeah. Well, when you look at it, now this article is a little bit dated. It's, I think, about from the end of September, but they talk about Edward Mansfield of Iowa, Keith Blackwell of Georgia, Charles Kennedy of Florida, as well as Robert Young, currently Michigan's Chief Justice. The one that I saw that I really liked was Margaret Ryan, who's been on a 15-year term as the Armed Forces Court of Appeals judge. I think there's some good people out there. Now, I did hear that there had been a recent meeting between Trump and Cruz about Supreme Court. Now, I don't know. I don't want to be misleading in the sense that I don't know that means that he's considering Ted Cruz. He may be taking input from Ted Cruz on that.
Right.
But regardless, I mean, I think that is a step in the right direction.
Has Ted Cruz does he have the interest for it?
That's what we don't know. I mean, I don't know. Was that meeting about are you interested?
Well, I believe Mike Lee has shown the interest in it.
Yes.
I don't know if Cruz has.
And either one would be an intriguing pick, too, because I think they're both rock solid with their constitutional and conservative values.
Well, I agree. And they're looking for people that are going to be more like Anton Scalia and, who's going to come in and be staunch originalist as far as their interpretation of the Constitution.
Right.
And I think that's important that,
Even Lion Ted?
Yeah, it's amazing.
How's he going to get around that one?
I know, that'd be a tough one to maneuver around.
He did come out and he did, Cruz came around and said that.
I think they've healed their wounds, so.
And that happens in politics.
Sure it does.
I mean, if you let that those fester too long, you don't move forward because you just have to put it behind you and go on. It'll be interesting. Like I say, I'm not sure that that's a statement that Cruz is under consideration. Personally, I'd like to see Ted Cruz be put in charge of the Department of Justice. Because
that's a great idea too.
And I saw Jeff Sessions' name come up as far as that too.
I've heard Sessions mentioned as the possibility for Homeland Security or Defense.
Right. Well, Homeland Security, and I'll pull that one up, and it is the sheriff. I think it's Joe Clark.
Yeah,
As CNN is calling him a terrorist, he is under consideration to be the head of the Homeland Security. Rick said, "What better to have a terrorist in charge?
He should know the inner workings of."
He should. He'll know all the gears and how they turn in that organization. Then,
From CNN, that'd be a ringing endorsement.
well, exactly. If CNN says they're no good, we're gonna take you in a second. But they were saying that they're afraid. Well, and again, this is coming from CNN, that some people are afraid of Sheriff Clark's policies and what he represents. I think it's terrorism, she stated. I want to know. So, are we going to take terrorism now and use it like racism?
Well, you can guarantee CNN will.
Yeah, because this is what they think gins up the conservative side. So if we call him a terrorist, well, no, you can't have that guy. Right. But again, they're underestimating the Republican electorate. They think we're a bunch of stupid bumpkins. I always enjoy how they portray the Republicans as uneducated.
Yeah.
And I got news for them. A lot of the people that support them on the other side are the uneducated.
Well, I mean, that's kind of proofs in the pudding there.
Yeah.
Just turn on the TV.
Yeah, exactly. So you see, well, a story I'll relay from Cincinnati. A black gentleman it was on Wednesday after Trump won. He got in his car and he was getting ready to pull out, and he had a Trump sticker on the back of his automobile. And this woman was standing. He couldn't pull out because this woman was kicking his bumper. And so he got out of the car and asked her. He asked her, "Why? What are you doing?" And she could barely articulate the fact that she was upset with him being a Trump supporter. And he basically, after talking to her a few minutes, said, "Why don't you call the DNC and get your marching orders so you can find out what you're supposed to say to me?"
Right.
So, touche to that gentleman for for that. But they assign the term terrorist kind of liberally right now. Well, there you go, liberal. Liberally to anybody who doesn't fit into what they want to see in the government.
Well, that's true, and some of my favorite viewing pleasure has been this last couple of days looking at some of these videos online of some of the meltdowns of Hillary supporters.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't understand it. And when Barack Obama won, I don't think we went out and burned down buildings.
No.
Absolutely not.
Were we upset? But you know what happened is you saw a movement, and we'll see if the Democrats do this. But you saw the Tea Party rise when Obama got elected. They organized. They have made an impact. They don't get credit for this.
Nope.
But the Tea Party's made an impact. That's why Donald Trump is sitting there right now.
Absolutely. I was going to say the Tea Party is one of the predominant reasons of why Donald Trump's even president-elect right now.
Right. So what they did it the correct way. They organized groups. They called and wrote letters to our legislature telling them they don't like the way it's going. And we were able to take over the House, and then we took over the Senate, and now we've been able to take over the executive branch. But that's because we organized, we did it the right way.
Right.
Burning down buildings, crying, getting counselors in college, they're giving them coloring books and soft, cuddly toys so they can take their frustration.
I should have went to UCLA for college, I really should have.
You get a stuffed animal and a coloring book, right? It was such a deal.
Well, that's replaced basket weaving 101 and intramural pottery.
Right.
And I guarantee you, our tax money is paying for those coloring books
absolutely.
and the teddy bears. And of course, not to mention in California, they have the $7 trillion debt, which
But
is
that's exactly the reason why this movement has happened. This coddled atmosphere and this sense of entitlement that is in this country today.
Right.
People are fed up with it.
Yeah, I mean, every one of us has fallen flat on our face sometime in our lives and had to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. And right now we have a society that relies on the government to take care of them.
Right.
And one thing Rick brought up, and I don't know if you guys saw this, but he was talking about how there's been some talk about rebuilding the infrastructure, and I'm all for that. You know what? If you take the money and that has to be done, our roads and some of our bridges are in disrepair. Let's take all the money that we waste on the UN and that we send all over the place, except spending it on the United States.
Right.
Let's build this into our welfare system and tell these people, we're going to pay you $20 an hour to go out there and start working on roads and working on bridges, and we're going to give you employment for that money that you're going to receive.
Right.
And I think
That's a great idea.
a great start to.
But I think it goes back to Trump's ideology of America first.
Yes.
Which is what we have to do. We have to put this country first.
We do, and the military obviously flocked to Trump. Chad was in the military. Tim, you've been in the military.
Yes.
The military leaders have just been weeded out over the last 8 years.
And they flocked in record numbers.
Yes,
This go round.
right, because they didn't want to be under the leadership or the lack of leadership.
They've been stripped down to bare bones nothing.
right, and
That's right.
And
It's like a non-violent Stalinist type purge.
Sure. Well, and they want to rely on UN troops to defend our country is basically what the bottom line is. They want a world army instead of us having our own military to take care of our own affairs, because I guess we're not accountable then.
Right. Well, we need to get back to peace by strength.
I agree.
Yeah, and it's more about taking your sovereignty.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the record here. I should have pulled it up. But how many times have we seen? And for those who are too young that are watching, I apologize. Look this stuff up. Ronald Reagan got this bad reputation of being this big bad guy starting wars everywhere. We weren't starting wars everywhere, but I'll tell you what: if you attacked America, he was going to set an aircraft carrier right off your shore.
Absolutely.
And he had the planes on ready.
Right.
And he had the troops on ready, and he said, stand down, or else you're going to find out what America's fury is. And we don't have that. And you're right, Chad. Donald Trump has make America great again. And the guys have been, Obama, Clinton, they actually, it's almost like they hate our country because they're ashamed of being Americans.
When I got out of the military, I spent 12 years, and when I got out, I said, man, I really miss it. I miss the people more than anything.
Sure.
But it got to a point where, halfway through Obama's term, I had looked at myself and said, I don't know if I could serve today proudly. And that's sad.
Yes.
Right.
And when the person that's at the top of the heap is somebody you can't respect, then you have to sit there and wonder why you're doing it. And when you're in the military, you don't have time to think about why you're doing it because it could cost your life.
Well, you're not.
Chad,
That's correct.
Chad, I had similar thoughts and feelings as what you had too, and I'm a veteran of the Vietnam era, so I remember that too.
Yeah, but it is. It feels good that at least it looks like the government will take some steps to rebuild the military. And everybody's, you got all your ships, and you got all your planes. Yeah. Donald Trump was saying during one of the rallies, we use spare parts from stuff in museums to rebuild our ships and our planes.
Right.
And we do need to modernize, and we do need to keep up with China and Russia and the other bad guys in the world. And maybe they won't be bad guys. Maybe, Trump said that he's going to be able to build relationships with everybody.
Right.
And I hope that's the case. I hope that, we don't have to worry about that. And
There's a lot to be said for keeping your friends close and your enemies closer.
Right.
That's right. And you know what? If there's a little bit of fear in there with the respect, that's all well and good.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what Reagan had, is a combination of fear and respect from our enemy.
Right. Well, we're running towards the end, Tim. But I'm going to run some names down here. We'll talk about them here briefly. It says that some possibilities for Trump's new administration would be Rudy Giuliani as possibly Attorney General.
Right.
I don't have a problem with.
I've heard that too, and I think that'd be a good choice.
I don't know if Rudy's is ready to accept that. I mean, he's got a lot of stuff going on in the private side.
Right.
He's got some pretty big business stuff going on right now. I wonder who his second in line would be if Mayor Giuliani does not accept that position.
And Jeff Sessions, who's on here, has been brought up. They said that he could be in charge of the Pentagon. Jeff Sessions, Ted Cruz, we talked about.
Right.
Those guys, with their legal backgrounds, would be good choices to be in there with the Department of Justice. And boy, I got some ideas for them. Some people they might want to start investigating right off the bat. And then Newt Gingrich potentially is being considered for the Secretary of State.
Well, I think that'd be a fine choice too.
Yeah.
The big question is, would these people be available? Would they be willing to put their personal interests aside and serve under a Trump administration?
I think Newt would. I agree with Chad. I don't know that Rudy, he's been out of it for such a long time, and I'm sure he's got his oars and other rivers right now that maybe don't lead him to getting back into that.
And I think that Secretary of State position is one that excuse me, President-elect Trump really needs to spend some time on that position.
Yes.
He's got to get that position right on day one.
Because we saw what happened.
We've already.
Well, the last two have been real doozies, haven't they?
How's Newt's relationship with Putin?
yeah. Well, Putin and the Middle East,
right?
Which which is another swamp that needs to be drained. But the whole thing there, Newt, it could be a good choice. We just saw that if you get the wrong person in Secretary of State,
right,
who doesn't have the right interest in the country, it can be a very destructive situation. Bob Corker, possibly somewhere in the State Department. Ben Carson, Surgeon General. Retired General Mike Flynn could be in line for the Secretary of Defense position or some other security.
Yeah, and that's who I really see him putting in that defense position.
Mike Flynn.
He's got a very close relationship with Mike Flynn as well.
Right.
Yes, I agree.
This one I don't like. I don't, Chris Christie. I'm sorry. I'm just not a Chris Christie guy.
No, I'm not crazy about him either. Yeah, in fact, I heard he was mentioned early on for possible Attorney General, and
yes,
I wasn't too happy to hear that, but his name has since kind of disappeared off of that list.
Yeah, I think that if they're doing any kind of polling on that he probably got less than resounding recommendations. Stephen Bannon is on here, and of course, now that Reince Priebus is chief of staff, Stephen Bannon, I think, would be a good press secretary being in Breitbart and that. I think he'd be the guy that could handle the media.
Yeah, I could see Bannon moving into that position. I could also see her name just slipped my brain. The campaign manager.
Oh, Conway. Kelly Conway. Yeah, Kelly Conway.
Her name's been mentioned for that as well.
Right, and
that'd be a great pick, I think.
Yeah. And
she did an excellent job with his campaign.
She did a phenomenal job.
She did, and then the other gentleman that I saw mentioned here was his name is escaping me here right now. I'm trying to.
Which one was it?
Peter Thiel. He is a gay Republican business genius. He is the guy that created PayPal. And he's being considered for some position with the I'm losing it, guys. Help me out there with the
Commerce.
Yes, Treasury. And I think the thing with him,
Commerce, yeah,
the Commerce Department, and I think the thing with him is that he is. If you look at those people, you look at Kelly Conway is a white woman. Then you have Teal is a gay man, and then Ben Carson is a black man, and they say that Trump is the racist, yet he is spreading that wealth.
I think Trump's going to put whoever the best person is for the job that is available to him.
Right. And
is who he's going to put in place.
I agree.
Yeah, I totally agree too.
And that's why I think Middle America loves Trump.
And that's part of what has made him such a successful businessman, is he's gotten good people in place within his organization, people he can trust and he can delegate to, and people that are talented and competent.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Tim, we got to run. We got our next guest lined up here, but thanks as always for coming on the Razor's Edge. It's been great. We're going to take a little break after this week. We're going to get into a little football next week, previewing Ohio State, Michigan, and some of the big games. Thanksgiving weekend will be off to let everybody celebrate, and then we'll be back in December to rekindle most likely some Sports Planet, but when needed, the Razor's Edge will slice through the darkness, and we'll be back on. So, Tim, thanks again.
Thank you, Bill. And just remember this: conservatives don't start fires; they hold people's feet to the fire.
Very good. Thank you, Tim. Thanks for being on tonight.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
And that was Tim Fillinger in Cleveland. Our next guest is Alex Newman, who is a regular participant. Chad, he writes for the New American, which is a publication for the John Birch Society. Alex is a teacher, and he is a globetrotter. He is all over the world. He has sat in on UN meetings. I don't know how this guy gets into what he gets into, but he is most definitely a very connected guy, and we're going to talk to him a little bit about how the media is in the spin mode right now, since he's really directly involved with that. And then we're also going to talk about how the globalists view this, and George Soros, how this has been a blow to their ego and their plans for a world government.
Right.
So.
Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system.
Okay, so we will try to get a hold of Alex here again. So when we look at this, one of the things that we talked a little bit earlier, Chad, there has been, there's just been this complete disconnect between reality and the media as far as them trying to figure out what's going on. And at least that's the way they portray it. I'm not so sure that it isn't a show.
Right.
But they don't know how to approach it. They don't know how to change the thinking process. That frustrates them because they can't control what we think.
Right, and I wonder how much of it, too, is backpedaling. Do you sense that you get some of it is backpedaling from, I mean, they missed everything
right
on this turnout.
Yeah. Well, I agree, and I think that's where one of the problems lies, is the polling is obviously slanted because the samples that they take, they're not sampling, if they want to be accurate, which I don't think they do, but they're not sampling the right people to get accurate assessments of what the electorate's saying. And I've said for many weeks now, I think there was a bubble of voters that nobody knew how they're going to vote.
Right.
Because they were either, they were maybe embarrassed or didn't want ridicule for voting for Trump or Clinton. So I think there was that 20% that just said, hey.
Right, and I think you had those people, too, that there, I think there was so many pockets in rural America out there that the pollsters just overlooked.
Right.
And didn't even get an opinion from.
Sure.
And I think that adds to that majority of what came in and put him over the top.
Yeah, I agree. And it
goes back to when I was saying the blue-blooded, red-hearted American. I mean, just the DNA America came out.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the ones that were Gary Johnson people, at least some that I know, went into the booth, and the ones that were going to vote for Hillary or against Hillary did vote against Hillary. But the ones that were going to vote against Trump, I think at the last second they reconsidered and said, man, what am I going to do to the Supreme Court?
And that's who the DNC should be upset with, is the Gary Johnson's ticket. And
yeah, that 3.5% that went his way are the ones that influenced the whole election. Yeah, and it's kind of funny. I find that Bill Clinton got into office because Ross Perot ran against George Bush.
Right.
And it looks like the third party again had an influence on this election by him coming in and stealing a 3.5%, which would have been enough for.
Well, I've always said you can't, you can never overlook the silent majority.
Oh, absolutely, and I think that's the thing here. We're trying to get a hold of Alex right now, and I'm going to make sure that we have the right phone number for him. But it's just been one of those things where we. Hello, Alex. Bill Ray back on Razor Edge. How you doing?
How are you, Bill?
Good. Hey, I'm joined by Chad Taylor. Chad is a business owner here in Wilmington, Ohio, and we've talked a little bit about the effects of Obamacare on his business and business in general in the United States, and where Trump can help this country business-wise. With you, though, and I had mentioned to you, what I'd like to talk about is, since you're directly involved with the media, they seem to be in a tailspin right now. They can't figure this out. What are you seeing with the media right now? What's your take on this?
Well, I mean, the media has basically lost all credibility. They cannot be taken seriously on anything. And so if the media tells you that, the sun rose today, you need to go to your window and make sure that's true. The media cannot be trusted anymore on anything. And I think this is pretty clear now. I think the American people have realized this too. Even the liberals, because, the liberals were promised that, Trump was a fringe candidate and glorious Hillary was going to seize power, and there was no question about it. And, now they all have egg on their faces. And so, I think it's brilliant. I think the media has now been officially and totally and completely discredited. And I don't see how they can even recover from this. And that goes for a lot of the, pseudo-conservative media as well. So.
Yeah. Did you notice that, again, instead, in their figuring of how the electorate voted, there seemed to be an angry backlash. They came out and they were condemning the heartland of America as being stupid dolts that don't have an understanding of how politics work.
Yep, and I think that further contributes to the erosion of their credibility. They've been saying that Trump supporters are racist and yahoos and hillbillies and rednecks and anti-Semites, immigrant haters, Islamophobes, homophobes. Name a bad thing that the media could call Trump supporters, and they've done it 100 times, 200 times. And I think there's a whole bunch of additional benefits from this, because the media likes to shut down discussion on anything by throwing out their favorite little terms, by saying, oh, you're a xenophobe, or whatever term, homophobe, Islamophobe, whatever thing you want to pick.
Deplorable.
And it's obvious now that these terms have lost their power, so the media is not going to be able to shut down debate anymore by just throwing out terms that they think are going to shut people up. So that's good too.
Yeah, I noticed one article referred to the media, the right-wing media, so they call it, is the alt media, which stands for alternative media, and they were saying it in a condescending way to try to make the people that voted on that side feel like we were inferior, but yet they still don't understand the policies that drove this election, like Obamacare, like the immigration reform. They're just a disconnect, and are they that far removed, or are they just so deep in people's pockets that they can't get their hands out?
Right.
Yeah, I think you make a really important point here, Bill, and I think it's time that people stop calling them the mainstream media,
right? Because
there's nothing mainstream about them. The real mainstream media now is the talk shows like yours, is the InfoWars and the Breitbarts and the WorldNet Dailies and the New American and American thing. These are the mainstream media. These are much more closely aligned with mainstream America than the lunatics at the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Communist News Network or the Clinton News Network, whatever you want to call it, CNN. And so they're the fringe media. We could call them the alt media. Yeah, they have big budgets because the mega pharmaceutical companies and the crony capitalists like to give them money. But they're so out of touch with what a normal, everyday, regular American is thinking. And I think this election just proved it. So.
Yeah, and so. We take that and let's jump into globalism for a second with this. I think the problem is with Brexit, with Donald Trump being elected, they feel like they're losing control, is the perception I get, and what do you expect someone like George Soros? How are they going to rebound? Is it going to be trying to put tighter controls on the media, or obviously the UN owns the internet now? What do you see as far as how are they going to control the alternative media, as they call it?
Well, I think one of the big things we need to watch for is how they're going to treat the Trump administration. They may be wounded, but they still have a lot of power.
Right.
And so, I think one of the things that we need to be on guard for is as an example, an effort to crash the dollar and then say, well, see what you get, you dumb voters, when you disobey us and you go with the other voices that we disagree with. So that, I think they would use something like that as a strategy to try to discredit their opposition. But beyond that, I don't think censorship and government controls over the media are out of the question at all. If you look just shortly before the election, Obama gave a speech in Pittsburgh, and he said he criticized what he called the wild, wild west media landscape, right? And he said we need some kind of curating function that's going to help us, determine what's truthful and what's not. And so you can tell that they're nervous. I mean, they're probably panicked. And I think the UN is another key element to this. The surrender of the internet architecture to a global body was no accident. They've been plotting this for many, many years. This has been part of a deliberate agenda. They actually have a UN organization that they want to empower with control over the internet. It's called the International Telecommunications Union. It's actually run by a communist Chinese agent, and the Korean press said, hey, so, we're worried about your censorship. What do you think about censorship? Oh, censorship, that's in the eye of the beholder. We don't have a common definition of censorship. So that type of move is coming, and the internet has provided probably the single greatest tool for awakening the masses since Gutenberg's printing press. So the elites are in a panic about it. They thought they were going to use it to control us, and here it is waking up millions and billions of people all over the world. So they're not done yet. They're not out yet. They are not going to give up that easily. So we need to be on guard for all those things.
Chad, you had something?
I was just going to say that Trump's already out tweeting at the New York Times. I don't know if you're on Twitter or not, but he's calling out the New York Times today because they're stating that Donald J. Trump believes more countries should acquire nuclear weapons. He says, how dishonest are they? I never said this. I mean, this is the kind of this just shows you how radical they are in what they post. And my question would be, how do you think the Trump administration, you talk about how we got to have our guard up, and then you raise a good point that the media still has a lot of power. Well, how does the Trump administration deal with that? How do they control that?
Right, that's great point.
Well, I think in one sense, the people now realize what has been going on here. Again, even the liberals now realize that the media was trying to dupe them and was trying to deceive them. So I think really all Trump needs to do is give them the rope to hang themselves with. I mean, that's what they've done. They've totally discredited themselves. Trump didn't have to help them. They did it on their own. They made total fools of themselves. So, I think Trump just can let them keep doing what they're doing. Keep telling the truth. Keep your friends close. Keep feeding information to media outlets that are willing to tell the truth to the American people, and let the establishment media fade away. I mean, if you look at just the finances here, you can see that the establishment media is in major economic trouble. The Washington Post had to be rescued by the billionaire who runs Amazon. This is not a profitable operation. It used to be very profitable. Same thing with the New York Times. They had to be rescued by a Mexican billionaire, Carlos Slim. And, these things are not profitable anymore. And there's a reason for that. People are tired of being lied to. Right. So as long as the media continues to insist on lying and it continues to insist on pushing their fringe leftist political views, they're going to continue failing financially. And there's not enough billionaires in the world to keep propping up these discredited media outlets if they don't have any readers. And that's where they're moving.
Yeah, and as a businessman, you would think investing your money into a losing proposition, unless you see some turnaround, which I don't see in the foreseeable future, the print media especially, I just don't see any hope for it. Or ABC, NBC, CBS. I mean, I can't tell you the last time I've actually turned on one of those to watch the news.
Oh, no, I don't.
And I think that's happening everywhere. Even with the football, people are just, you have these dummies that, protesting the national anthem.
Yep.
People are just tired of that stuff. They don't want to watch that anymore. So as people refuse to watch this garbage, advertisers will stop advertising with them. And, they can go the way of the dodo bird as far as anybody's concerned. And as you know, no skin off our back, who cares?
Barack Obama said recently in a meeting overseas that there is a need to respond effectively to the issues that have been raised by globalization. And I guess Trump getting elected, and we talked about Brexit before, that's got to have them changing, or do you think that accelerates Agenda 21 in the takeover of individual rights?
Well, I think the globalists are at kind of a turning point here, and I've seen this for a good while now. They seem to be accelerating their agenda only because so many people are waking up so quickly. So they're losing their window of opportunity to close the trap door here. And once they lose it, they could be set back decades in their agenda. Before he took office, before he was elected, Trump was talking about the United Nations as the enemy of the United States. Or those are his words, the enemy of freedom. So just killing the United Nations would set the globalists back decades, maybe generations. And so I think we can expect them to try to accelerate the plan if they can do it, but they have a big problem with Trump. So I hope Trump's security people are paying very, very close attention, and I hope that the American people realize that the establishment that Trump said he was taking on is very real and is very capable of perpetrating all kinds of things to accelerate their quest for power. And I think we could look for economic problems to be blamed on the Trump administration, to be blamed on the Brexit. And so people need to be on guard up for that. But on the flip side, again, if the media says it was Trump's fault, you have at least half the population now that will say, wait a minute, you media, you guys lie about everything. So what's going on here?
Yeah, and the thing that I guess worries me, I know that there's been some examination of some of the people that Trump has considered putting into positions, and unfortunately this afternoon, I guess Reince Priebus was named chief of staff. That came after the fact that Stephen K. Bannon's name had come up for chief of staff, and then the media vilified him right away as being an extreme conservative, racist, and that. And that kind of worries me. I don't know. I hope Trump didn't succumb to the fact that after what Bannon did for him to get that campaign straightened out, I hope he didn't succumb to that kind of pressure.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who have expressed concerns about this, including people who are very close to the Trump inner circle.
Right.
There's a lot of questions right now about how many establishment people he's going to be willing to take on board. And, chief of staff is a very influential position. If you look at some of the other names that have been swirling around Trump, you have people like Newt Gingrich, who's, counsel on foreign relations,
right.
People like that. And I think Trump needs to be careful with these guys. I mean, he should know that these people have opposed him every step of the way, even his fake friends. Like Newt Gingrich has kind of pretended to be by his side all along, probably, as a backup plan. Well, if he gets in power, we don't want to burn all of our bridges with him. And so you have people like this, and Trump needs to be very careful because they are perfectly capable, in many cases, of sabotaging what he promised to do. And so, I won't say that I'm not concerned about those things. I am, and I know people who are close to Trump's inner circle, again, who are also concerned about this. But I think it's also up to the American people and to the electorate to keep his feet to the fire, say, hey, you said you were going to do this, make sure it happens. If Paul Rhino is being an obstruction, he needs to be removed as Speaker. And, it's all kinds of stuff like that.
Well, you mentioned Paul Ryan. I was reading on that, the chief of staff pick. Previously, he's got a very close friendship with Paul Ryan.
Yep.
And I'm wondering how much that's playing into his selection, because Donald Trump needs to get some legislative action right out of the gate.
Right.
And that could have been the tipping point between Bannon and him, was his relationship with the Speaker of the House is already in place, and that could bode well.
I think Paul Ryan is in a very tenuous situation because of the fact he came out against Trump.
Right.
Trump wins, and now all of a sudden he wakes up thinking, man, am I in jeopardy now?
Right.
And I wonder if I guess if he really wanted to, he could, he could make that move and pressure him out of there. But what do you think, Alex, about that?
Yeah, I think these are all legitimate concerns, and what Chad said about Paul Ryan, and maybe that's why he put Pravis in there as kind of a bridge to Ryan. That may well be the case, and but I think the voters were pretty clear that they supported Trump's agenda, and so I don't think Trump really should be giving much way to these people in Congress. And actually, I don't understand why they want to return Ryan to the speakership. I think the American voter and members of the House of Representatives should say, hey, look, the American people said they didn't want TPP. Ryan was one of the main cheerleaders of TPP. The American people said they were tired of the illegal immigration. Paul Ryan is one of the main illegal immigration guys.
Yep.
They said they're tired of big government and Planned Parenthood. Who has been signing the checks to fund all this stuff? It's Paul Ryan. So Trump really has the advantage here. And, he's a smart guy. Hopefully he knows what he's doing, and he's not ready to surrender. But the establishment has ways of, wiggling into everything that they want to wiggle into. So.
Right. Now, and if you look at both the parties, you look at the Democrats, you look at the Republicans, the Republicans can't, on the surface, they appear that they feel good about winning the White House back, but I don't think they really do. I think they're sitting there thinking, what's going to happen?
What's going to happen to me?
Yeah, and what's going to happen next election?
Right.
We saw Donald Trump come out of nowhere. Jeb Bush, in my mind, is finished. Some of these other people that ran, they're finished because John Kasich, I think, is finished too, because people don't see them being any different than all the people have been causing the problems. So I don't know that.
It's interesting you mentioned the governor, because Governor Kasich actually has reached out to President-elect Trump a couple times on congratulating him on where he's at. I think they're all backpedaling just like the media was.
Yeah. And on the other side, the DNC has talked about hiring some guy with Muslim ties to become the new chairman, a congressman from Minnesota, become the chairman for the DNC. Do you sense that there could be a third party, or that the party system is just totally disintegrating before our eyes?
Yep.
It's interesting. I think the Republican establishment, the Republican leadership, is going to have some serious soul searching to do, because they may well become politically irrelevant if they don't, deal with this in a proper way. And, the lesson that they need to take here is, hey, the American people are onto us. They're tired of this dumb stuff, and they're interested in freedom and the Constitution and stopping globalism. All the things Trump was talking about, Americanism, not globalism. And if the Republican establishment does not take that lesson to heart and start turning things around, they are going to be, I think, completely irrelevant politically. And we're already seeing that happen. The entire Republican establishment and the entire Democrat establishment oppose Trump. And so, I think it would be a very good thing if the two-party system started disintegrating. Maybe it is a good thing if we open up now for, Constitution Party, Libertarian Party, have some alternative voices there. And, the establishment wing of the Republican Party can go join the Democrat Party, because their agenda is pretty similar anyway. So this is interesting times. I think it's going to be a big shakeup politically.
And it's no different than the business that brings the best product to the market first. Whichever one of these two parties figures this out first,
right,
can actually. There's going to be some dramatic change in 2 years in the House and Senate, and they got to be first to the table on it.
And that's where the third party, if they can somehow produce the best candidate, the third party can slide right in there and really.
I personally think America's looking for that third party right now.
Right.
They put Donald Trump in office, and now they're sitting back going, "What's next?"
Right. Alex, in the first 100 days, they say that's the most important days, and I've already seen, of course, the Democrats are running scared because the Affordable Care Act is on the ropes. If the Republicans don't do something about this, because I've seen some articles just in the last day where they're saying, well, the Republicans may back off on the Affordable Care Act. If they endorse that, then I say we kick all their asses out of office right now.
and I think the media is trying to push for that, right? To say, oh, Obamacare, at least parts of Obamacare are so popular, you guys don't really want to repeal that. But I think the voters spoke pretty loud and clear. We do want to repeal that. We really want to repeal that. It's destroying health care. Enough of that. And, I think the Republican Party is going to have, the members of Congress and so on would have a very, very tough time explaining that to their constituents back home. We've been demanding an Obamacare repeal for how long now? 6 years, 7 years?
Yep.
And, the fact that they still haven't gotten the letter, and they ask, we couldn't do anything because Obama could veto bills. That's not true. The people who've actually read the Constitution, they could have stopped the funding for this as soon as the Republicans took over the House of Representatives.
Right.
They did not. This time, voters sent a loud and clear message, unmistakable. We're tired of this monstrosity. So, I don't know. If they know what's good for them, they'll get rid of it, and they'll not listen to the liars in the media who've been totally exposed. So.
Yeah, we hope you're right about that, as do all the other Americans. Well, Alex, thanks for being on the Razor's Edge, as always. You always have great input, and we will be back in touch with you. We'll be taking a week off next week, and then Thanksgiving week off. But then back in December, we'll be revisiting the Razor's Edge. So thank you so very much during this election cycle for all your valuable input.
Hey, thank you guys so much for what you're doing. I appreciate the opportunity to come on, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Yep, and that's Alex Newman with the New American. Chad, so you've experienced the Razor's Edge.
I have. Thank you. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, thank you for being on. Loved your input. Don't be a stranger. You're always welcome.
I appreciate the invite. We'll have to do it again.
Yes. And so for Rick Phillips and Chad Taylor, I'm Bill Rayback, and thank you for being with us tonight.